Okay, hi everybody. You may remember me from last year for those of you who attended. I did a talk on nutrition at the time. Sorry, I'm just going to adjust this because I'm a bit of a short ass. So, there we go. That's better. Yeah, I prefer that. More punk rocker style. Oh, cheers. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today, I mean, it's 2012, you know, Nibiru is going to end us all, something like that. So what I'm actually going to talk about really is people talk about collapse. The problem about the word collapse is it implies a singular event. It's not going to be a singular event. What I'm going to talk about really are the main challenges that are facing our civilization, human society, whatever you want to call it. The two main drivers being energy and finance. So I want to make a quick start on energy. A lot of the things I'm talking about here, I should mention if you want to look into this stuff more further. Really good websites to look at energy, oil drum, automatic earth. I can't recommend the automatic earth website enough. If you want to know about finance and these sort of things, I suggest you look at the work of Nicole Foss and others. Really, really good. So energy is the master resource. It determines the amount of work that can be performed in any system, be it an internal combustion engine or be it a society. An example would be the Roman Empire. This was a civilization that depended mainly on solar energy. Solar energy was then changed into food, treasure, things like that. In order for the civilization to expand, it had to acquire more resources, be it slaves or what have you from other territories. This is how civilizations basically go about their business. And socioeconomic activity and complexity are driven by energy. So if there's not, the lower the energy, the lower the complexity. The higher the energy, the higher the complexity. We're living in a civilization that runs on really high amounts of energy, and that's mainly thanks to one thing, and that's oil. The great thing about oil is giving us great things like derivatives, Xboxes, and the like. You don't really need an energy subsidy really to create bubbles of wealth. I'm going to be talking a lot about bubbles and I'm going to talk about what bubbles actually are. I'm not also going to be using a different way of looking at economics, and it's called socioeconomic theory, which really describes Ponzi pyramid scheme dynamics combined with human herding behavior, really, human psychology. Economics is really just a modern-day cargo cult, as you're about to see. There's a lot of its founding principles are unfalsifiable. They're defined in a way that you can't falsify them. So if I say that Jesus died for our sins, well, you can't falsify that statement. You can't find out the way it's constructed, if that's true or not. And that's the problem with economics. Complexity and energy, like I said, are intertwined. So if one goes up, the other goes up. If one goes down, the other goes down. You can never have them going different ways. And we've been basically living on an energy inheritance, a planetary lifetime, once in a planetary lifetime energy inheritance, and that's oil under the ground. Earth is a sphere. All spheres are finite, therefore all our resources on this planet are finite. And the energy income, going back to the Roman Empire again, this was a civilization that ran on human labour, animal labour, those kinds of things. We now have lots of devices and whatnot, electric slaves that can do a lot more for us. And every year we are burning 400 years worth of primary production of energy just on oil alone, so which is phenomenal. And I'm going to explain more about energy in a bit now. So just to look at oil, we can see that basically the amount of discoveries are going down and down and down. You'll hear in the media, we found 1, 2 billion, 3 billion barrels of oil in the North Sea and wherever else. Well, 1 billion barrels of oil will last the world about 11 days. So really it's, next to fuck all. We are really, really struggling with this. So we use on roughly about a cubic mile of oil a year. And there is nothing out there that's going to replace it. As you can see there, you require 500 megawatt power coal-fired plants, just working for 50 years just to provide the energy that 1 year's worth of oil gives us. The best one is solar panels. So people talk about, maybe we can have renewable energies and things like this. A lot of these renewable technologies are brown, they're not green. because, for example, I can't remember, but solar panels require something, I can't remember how many solar panels it is, but it requires about a ton of coal to manufacture, things like that. Also, the rare earth elements, things like this, we're also running out of that as well. And also, as you can see there, I'm not going to go through them all, but you can just see basically that there is nothing out there that's going to replace oil. Yeah, this is a Hubbard curve. You may be familiar with this. This just shows production. If we take a look here at the gross Hubbard curve, this is the one that most people are familiar with. So production peaks at the very top, and then it starts to decline. If we look where production has peaked, it's roughly around 2005, and that's generally, it's hard to get accurate figures because lots of governments keep oil figures as state secrets, particularly Saudi Arabia, places like that. There's a lot of good work done by various people in the field who look at this sort of stuff, like the people from the oil drum, etc. Now, a really important thing to note is that it's all fine and well having energy or energy sources, but how much energy does it take to get that energy out of the ground to attain it? Back when in America, when they started drilling for oil, it took about 1 barrel of oil to retrieve 100 barrels of oil. Now it's decreasing rapidly, and that's called energy return on energy invested. And we're going to look in the next thing at the various sources of energy that we have and the energy return on energy invested. So the higher the higher they are up in the graph, the better the energy return on energy invested. And down here is the ridiculously large figures of energy measurement. So if we take a look at domestic oil in 1930, there we go, 100 to 1. In domestic oil, by the way, this is all for the US. Very hard to get figures for the UK, funnily enough. And as you can see, it declines in energy return, goes down to somewhere around 30 to 1 in the 70s for domestic oil. Interesting to note that if you look at imported oil, this slide here, maybe a bit hard for you guys to see. It's similar, but it's funny actually, we're actually getting, it's easier for America and other countries to get that oil than it is now to get it out of their own domestic production through war and what have you. And you can see domestic oil today is right at the bottom. Imported oil and all these other coal, I think unfortunately coal in the future we're going to be making a Faustian bargain. It's either that or freeze in the dark. Yeah, I think coal will be coming back in a big way, and that's going to have lots of implications for climate and things like that. And also, if we look at the so-called renewable technologies and what have you, if we see down here, you've got gasohol, which is, and tar sands. So gasohol is basically ethanol made from bioproducts, things like sugarcane and what have you. And the energy return on energy invested is abysmally low. Tar sands is like an arbitrage of synthetic crude and gas, or in sand. It involves tremendous amounts of. They actually have to burn natural gas, which is worth more, to actually attain this stuff. It's just a joke, really. And you can see there it's pretty much not going to happen. And we can also see here that the minimum energy returned on energy invested required for any form of civilization is 3 to 1. We're running around about 10 to 1 at the moment, and it's declining. And this is a physical hard limit, it's a physical constraint to growth. No amount of political ideology or wishful thinking is going to get us out of this. This is going away. This is a tidal wave of nature that is going to sweep us, to use rather poetic language. And as you can see, the hydrocarbon era is really a fleeting moment in human history. I mean, if I did it from 1600 to 2200, if I did it for when anatomically correct humans emerged about 50,000 years ago, what have you, you would see really that's just a little tiny line in human time. This is just a very fleeting moment in human history. And this is probably one of the most scariest graphs I've seen. Yeah, so do I need to say more? So, yeah, I mean, main thing to note, it's probably hard to see on here, but human population ends around here, around 7 billion mark. We're about 7 billion now. For every calorie of food everybody eats in the industrialized world, 10 calories of oil goes into its production, storage, and transport. So, remove the oil, what happens to human population? Now, I'm going straight into deflation because what I want to talk about is the relationship between energy and finance and the implications. A lot of people out there are talking about hyperinflation. They're getting their balls into a twist about how the Federal Reserve is printing more money and quantitative easing and all these things. What they're actually doing is just turning the money supply into another form of debt. That's all they're doing. They're not actually printing, although they are printing money in computers, all they're actually doing is just creating more debt to keep the pyramid scheme, the Ponzi scheme, that is the economy afloat. By the way, the reason we have immigration in this country is not because there's key jobs there or anything like this that need to be filled in. The main reason is that it's a pyramid scheme, the economy, interlocking pyramid schemes, and it requires constant new entrants to keep the pyramid scheme afloat. Because British people aren't breeding like bacteria, they need more people coming into the scheme. So deflation is not just falling prices. That statement alone just implies, it doesn't explain to you why the prices fall. What it actually is the contraction of the available money, supply and credit for available goods and services, inflation being the opposite. In a deflationary spiral, which is what we tend to get in these sort of situations, basically we've got so much debt out there, there's gargantuan claims to underlying wealth. So it's like a game of musical chairs. If you've got 100 people per chair and the music stops, I can assure you it's not going to be an orderly game of musical chairs. So you get, and then when people in a deflationary spiral, what happens then is because the money is going and the money is shrinking, people become frightened. They think, right, my job is uncertain, things like this. So they're less likely to spend. They're more like, if they have bank runs or banks go down, people are less likely to put their money in the bank. So they put it under the mattress, so to speak, and things like this. They're far less likely to spend, so businesses suffer, more jobs are lost, and then more depression, more demand destruction, and it just goes on like a cycle. And it's very, very hard to get out of. Roosevelt, to his credit, realised this and managed to get them, with the New Deal, managed to get the Americans out of it. He was fighting factions within the American hierarchy, particularly Stimson and all these people who are basically Nazis, essentially. These are the people who support the Nazis. They were all for like the complete fascist America that we're seeing today. What Roosevelt was good at doing was basically he realised that if you allowed these guys to get away with it, America would have gone under at that time. I think it was George Carlin who said about the Second World War, actually, just one on a tangent. The Second World War was just a battle between fascists, essentially. You know, Hitler lost, fascists won. So yeah, demand destruction, as I just hinted there. Yeah, you know, it's really about human psychology. In bubbles, when they're going up, which I'll go on more detail later on, people are optimistic about the future, people buy houses, things like this, and they feel happy about themselves, and they're greedy too. When they're feeling poor, though, they spend an awful lot less, and obviously this has implications for business as usual. So everything becomes less affordable, in particular the essentials. Now, why is that? Now, if it's falling prices, surely that's a good thing. If I can buy a house, say, for half the price of today, surely that's a good thing. But however, you've got a contraction of the money supply. And in deflation, the money supply shrinks faster than the prices fall. So you might be able to buy a house in the future for £10,000. That sounds wicked. House for £10,000. You'd be lucky to see £500 a year. That's the kind of thing that deflation brings. And also for the essentials, things like food, energy, things like this, because they are essentials and they're needed by people, there's more price support, so the price stays up higher. So it's actually harder to afford things like food and things like this. Lots of perverse things happen in deflationary times as well. During the Great Depression, because there wasn't enough money flying around, the velocity of money had stopped pretty much. You'd get farmers throwing milk down the drain, yet there'd be children starving down the road. So you get all these kind of perverse human behaviour patterns happening during these times. So just a bit about pyramid, or otherwise known as Ponzi dynamics, named after Charles Ponzi. So bubbles are all based on pyramid dynamics, and I will talk about some of the features of these. They all depend, all pyramid schemes, like your classical ones where people are just basically trying to rob you. Not all Ponzi schemes, by the way, are started with fraudulent intent. The pension schemes weren't initially started that way, but really pension schemes are based on, you know, unborn children coming into the scheme, basically, to feed the older generations. And unfortunately, that's really a form of fiscal child abuse, if you think about it. So, yeah, all pyramids depend on buying of new entrants. The more sources of income, the longer the duration of the Ponzi scheme. Pyramid schemes tend to last for about 4 generations. So, let's say, for example, Dan starts the Ponzi scheme, I'm in it second, and the rest of you come in progressively later. Basically, Dan is paying me my returns on your money, and after a while, there's not enough people coming into the scheme, so it just collapses. So you're all the empty bag holders, me and Ruff run off and have a nice holiday. So, but the more sources of income, the longer the duration. So the Ponzi scheme, that is the UK economy, global economy, is essentially, it's lasted this long because they found various ways, such as the dot-com bubble, things like that, to keep the economy afloat. Yeah, and funny enough, with the stock markets as well, the public insists on being handed the empty bag. You know, people say, you took a risk, and, you know, because you took that risk, you know, that's capitalism and what have you. But basically, whenever you look in the stock market, it's not a free market, it's full of insider trading. What's going on with the euro at the moment is not some market events or anything like that. It's orchestrated beggar my neighbour policies by the City of London and Wall Street, looking to basically beggar my neighbour. The financial oligarchy that exists in America and Britain, their capital structures are under threat. So basically they're making moves in order just to preserve their position. In fact, it's not that dissimilar to what the British got up to prior to World War II, World War I. So yeah, markets and human herding behaviour. Yeah, so economics, as I alluded to earlier, is a joke. It's a religion. They're not rational or efficient at all, anything but. They're driven by perception, not reality. If you want to have a really good understanding of, if you've got spare time to have a good laugh at economics, look at the book Debunking Economics by Dr. Steve Keen. He's an Australian professor of economics, and he's one who's firmly in the deflationary camp as well. Yeah, people are chasing momentum in markets. So if your house is going up in price, or your neighbour's house is going up in price, you're thinking, my neighbour's house price just went up 20% in a year. I've got to get in on that. So what people do is they're not really strategizing or operating with real knowledge or anything like that. What they're doing is they're just looking at everybody else and seeing what they're doing. So they chase the momentum, the good times, the feel of it. And funnily enough, when the reverse is true, when times are bad, they'll do that as well. Unfortunately, fear is a lot sharper emotion than greed, and unfortunately then you get really bad outcomes in that kind of situation. So as the bubble inflates, people collectively act on hope and greed, ignore risk, as I've said there, and as it implodes, people collectively act on fear and become risk averse. So and just another example of that, financial contagion is simply the spread of fear. You probably hear people like Robert Peston on the BBC and Stephanie Flanders. I love these people because they just give you a very, very tiny fragment of what's actually going on. And they talk about market events and things like that. They don't tell you that it's insider trading or highly criminal behaviour going on. But they always use this word contagion. You probably heard it a lot with regards to Greece and things like that. Fear drives sharp declines, and positive feedback rules. According to most economic theory, it's negative feedback that is the main, driver of these things, but it's actually positive feedback. So in a deflationary spiral, you get unemployment, severe unemployment. And you've got to remember the unemployment figures, even if let's say it's 10% for the sake of discussion, you've got 3 to 4 people generally dependent on that one income in some way, families, things like that. So a lot more people get affected by this. Employers will obviously exploit the lack of bargaining power. If you got your job and I'm your employer, I say to you, look, you're going to have to take a pay cut, you tell me where to go. Well, there's 300 other people who will probably do your job for you. What bargaining power do you have? You may be good at your job, but in the end of the day, if my company's struggling and I can't hold on to you, I'll get rid of you. I'll try anyway. At the moment, we've got fairly strong, robust employment law, but I can assure you, if the Tories and the rest of them get their way, that's going down the drain. So wages will tend to fall dramatically. Benefits will start to disappear because there just won't be the funds for it. And eventually, government and private sector will smash the unions. Or they'll try, and there'll be war on the labour markets. And unfortunately, if you look at like Hitler and Mussolini and all these other people, the first thing they did when they got into power was they smashed the unions. Because they knew that they were the only group of people in the societies at the time who could collectively stand up to those in the top, the oligarchy, the control group. And, I have I know people in unions and what have you, and, they've got some good points, they've got some bad points, but in the end of the day, we've got to work with people despite their imperfections, and unions are incredibly important in this. However, I'm a bit concerned that some of the unions in this country are also maybe slightly subverted as well. So we have a systemic financial crisis. What happened in 2008 is literally compared to what is to come, it's many magnitudes of order smaller. You're going to get high interest rates on the remaining debt and very high taxes, regressive taxation, we're already starting to see that. Foreclosures, bankruptcies, business failures, including food production, severe unemployment. Just on food production alone, that's just purely frightening. Also, if you look at a lot of like Tesco's and all these big supermarkets, their inventory systems are everything, just-in-time inventory systems. They're based on a global supply chain. During the last credit crunch, the Baltic Exchange depreciated 96%. A lot of shipping companies hit the wall because basically they couldn't get the credit notes or the insurance for the shipping to come across. So across the sea. So basically the products were there, the demand was across the sea, but they just couldn't get it across because there was lack of credit insurance to do that. Bank runs, you're all probably familiar with fractional reserve lending, all that sort of stuff. I don't have to go into great detail about that. Bank holidays, so if like the government says, right, we're going to have a bank holiday and they do it short notice, you've got to panic if you've got a lot of money in the bank. And lost savings. Actually, inflation is higher than what they're saying at the moment. So your pathetically low interest rates in your bank accounts, really you're getting taxed again. So people don't, in an inflationary period, people don't really notice how they're getting screwed. But in a deflationary, when you're not getting any money, you'll notice it dead quick. Even though everything drops in price, you'll notice it and you'll feel it a lot more. Deflation wipes you out much more comprehensively. And it's pretty obvious you get trade wars and international conflicts. Trade wars are starting now. China basically owns about 94% of the rare earth elements in the world. It has the most mines upstream, things like that. They're now no longer selling to Japan. Japan makes lots of mobile phones, TVs, things like that. So this is economic warfare. What's going on with the euro is basically, like I said, economic warfare of another kind. All the so-called revolutions that are going on in the Middle East are basically, NATO operations basically looking to tip over these countries to kick the Chinese out of Africa. That is the end game there. So international conflict, if we get past the 21st century, this will be known as the resource wars of the 21st century. And then a lot of other things will emerge as well. You'll get like pay-as-you-go essential services rather than, whether it's your phone and things like that. because you don't know when your next paycheck's going to come from. So for a business to survive, it'll just have to be pay as you go. And, you know, some areas, if you live in a city, you're not going to have key services breaking down as fast. But if you're living in the countryside, then it can be pretty brutal and unforgiving unless you're full-on sustainable. You know, because in a city at least there's public services and things like that. Some of these essential services will disappear over time. I'm not saying this is all going to happen in a weekend and everyone's going to run around with their hair on fire. I'm talking about a time frame of, well, I think deflation is going to happen within 2 to 5 years. And I would say the energy crisis will come within the 5 years after that. And it will be finance that will drive the energy problem, because it will become too expensive because there won't be enough demand around to buy the oil. So you'll see oil down at $20 in a barrel or something like that, or $5 a barrel, but it'll just be simply too expensive to drill, you know, tens of thousands of feet into under the sea to pull out oil. So property. There's a thing called normalcy bias. We all have our biases because we know we're all victims of culture and what have you, and the way the human brain thinks. Normalcy bias is, you know, if it's constantly sunny and I say it's going to rain tomorrow, you might think I'm slightly wrong there. But it's that kind of thing. You know, when things have been away a certain long time, people assume that's always going to be the case. Nothing lasts forever. Nothing humans make lasts that long, especially things that are corrupt. And so the real estate bubble is global. The earliest evidence we can see for the start of the real estate bubble was early 80s. And whenever a bubble bursts, you get a price undershoot. The price collapses very quickly, and a price undershoot is basically lower than what it was when it started. So when you get this price undershoot, we can expect to see real estate prices falling 90% on average around the world. So if you don't believe that can't happen, I suggest you look at Detroit, where you can pick up a house for $2,500. In fact, some of these houses are selling cheaper than the constituent costs of all the pieces that were made, materials required to make them. You know, and this is just, in this country, in America, right, they're recourse loans or non-recourse loans, I forget which. So if you've got a mortgage, you can give your keys to the bank, walk out the house, it's this problem. If the house prices crashes 90%, then it's the bank's issue. They've got to sell it. If they make a loss in it, they're tough luck. Yeah, they're trying to wiggle their way out of this using robo-signers and all kinds of other things. Obama recently, well, a few years back, he did a program to help people who have been foreclosed on. But really, what it was to turn these non-recourse loans into recourse loans, so they could basically get these people trapped into debt for the rest of their lives. Here, and in Canada and in Europe, if you buy a house for £100,000, it drops £90,000 in price, you can't sell it, because or let's say you do manage to sell your house, you're still defaulting and in negative equity, you're still liable for that negative equity. So you're no longer living in the house, and you're still paying the bank. What is this going to do to the middle class? It's going to eliminate it, basically. So, yeah, I think the middle class is just going to be a cul-de-sac. I'm just briefly going to go into what you can do. I mean, everything I'm telling you at the moment, don't take my word for it, look it up. Like I said, look at the Automatic Earth website, really good stuff there. Really big thinkers, people who are schooled in many disciplines and things like that. You know, I can't do justice to what these people do, but I think their message is so important. So, what you can call lifeboat building, and really it's more about giving yourself options, because the future is always uncertain. You can't predict everything. So, what can you do to basically give yourself room for manoeuvre? So the first thing and the most important thing is going to be hold no debt. How many people are in debt? Can't be honest. Student debt? Yeah. Mortgage debt? Yeah. Any other kinds of debt? Credit card debt? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, you want to be paying off that debt because interest rates at the moment are artificially low. Nobody really talks about the reason why they're artificially low, and the reason they're artificially low is to allow speculators to borrow large amounts of capital in order to speculate on whatever. So it's a war really between speculators and savers. Savers are getting punished through inflation and everything at the moment, but the real game is essentially interest rates are going to rise, is what I'm saying. And when you get deflationary depression, government's going to be trying to squeeze money back. Because there's such gargantuan excess claims to underlying wealth, you're going to get people wanting, they're going to raise the interest rates so they can get more money out of you. Yeah? And if money is hard to come by and you're having to service the debt, how are you going to pay for food, shelter, these kinds of things? Minimise dependence on credit. I mean, this is, again, it comes back to being debt. If you're still, I can't remember now, there's quite a lot of people in the UK who are paying off their mortgages with their credit cards or payday loans. This is a sanity, like, and unfortunately, I mean, if you've got a mortgage and you've got, like, say, still like a sizable loan left, I would suggest selling your house. I really would. Like, basically, your houses aren't going to be worth, if you have one, anywhere near what they were for another 300 years. To give you an example, Roman times, the property prices then, from its zenith, didn't come back till 1500 years later. So, it's not going to be business as normal. The deflationary spiral, thanks to the lack of energy as well, is just going to be phenomenal. And there will be a hyperinflationary phase, but that's probably 10 years down the line. So a lot of people at the moment worry about hyperinflation. I think the first one that's coming is deflation. So hold cash or cash equivalents, short-term treasuries, that kind of thing, national saving bonds or whatever. You can hold them for a year or two and get some return on them. I think there'll be a large capital flight to the dollar for two reasons. I think they'll go to war with Iran. That will drive up the price of oil because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. You have to buy oil in dollars unless you're buying it from Iran. That will basically, everyone will have to hold dollars more in order to buy oil for the economies, so the dollar will strengthen in the short term. And also, what the City of London and Wall Street are doing is trying to destroy the euro. And by the way, the Eurozone is 2/3 of this country's trade, and we're trying to destroy them. So, you can just see it's economic suicide. Gain some control over your basic essentials of existence. So that's food, water, energy, shelter. What you're looking for is redundancy, in the sense that, okay, if I look at your own personal situation, everybody's situation is different. If you're living in the country, you've got a nice garden, rather than planting begonias, maybe you want to start planting food, things like that. If you're living in a city, you're not going to be able to do much in the way of gardening, but maybe you can get an allotment, maybe you know someone, maybe you know something about gardening. If you're looking for top-down solutions, they're never coming. You can hold your breath and, you'll asphyxiate. So, really, it's all about looking into those things. So, where you have meetings, and an important thing is social capital. By meeting people, like coming to meetings like this, other things, whether it's environmental movements or what have you, by building social capital with people, by being useful to people, you're far more likely to navigate this short term. And really, what I'm trying to give you all is basically a conceptual framework of how to navigate the short term so you have a long term. Because unfortunately, for our generation, and particularly, the children around today, they're really going to have it tough, right? Because psychologically speaking, happiness is related to your expectations. We've got a civilization on many levels technologically is wonderful, but a lot of your electric slaves are going. The average American has the equivalent of 127 human slaves working for them, just to get by their daily day. What this will mean for labour, basically, is that you get a lot of labour just going back into energy production, like mines, or going into food production, back on the fields. To some people this sounds romantic, but there's nothing romantic about breaking your back growing lettuce or whatever. So, and this has massive social implications. Do we want to go back to feudalism? Because Consider precious metals as an insurance policy. I'm heavily into gold and silver. I used to be a property developer before. That's funny enough how I got into finance and Zeitgeist and all that was because of the credit crunch, and I wanted to understand it. I studied biochemistry, so I'm a bit of a trained scientist. So a lot of the stuff in economics didn't make sense to me. So this is sort of my intellectual journey into all of this. And so, you know, what I made from property developing abroad, I turned into gold. I've done okay out of it. But I'm also aware that in a deflationary spiral, because of demand destruction, gold will plummet, silver will plummet. Unless you get, say someone like Ron Paul getting into power and he says let's have a gold back currency, then I'll be super rich, buy it from him. So, you know, but I don't think that's going to happen. But, you know, for those of you who are, say, you know, in your 30s or younger, maybe in your 40s, if you're looking to have something to potentially retire to rather than work until you're dead, then you probably want to have gold, because that might, I'm not saying will, but it might help. And at the moment, gold is tax-free. Working with others gives you social capital, resilience and security, as I mentioned before. Even knowing dodgy people is a useful thing, because, like, I'm serious, people who can grift and people who know how to play things, yeah? These are people who are useful in their own way. I know this kind of sounds bizarre, but you know, there's going to be a lot of people running around like headless chickens, and a lot of people, unfortunately, when you get these kinds of, you know, social breakdown and what have you, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be tough, like, and, you know, yes, you know, unite with people who are useful and what have you, but also, you know, you can't help anybody if you can't help yourself. Beware of the banking system, need I say more? You know, there could be runs on banks. If you've got sizable savings, I'd worry about that. If you're under 50, you're never getting a pension. So if any of you got employer stakeholder pensions, yeah, you'd be better off taking that money and putting it to some better use, things like that. And look after your health, you know, because, you know, 10, 20 years down the line, you know, like this phone and a lot of these computers, they use tin to solder the bits in. Tin's quite an unstable element, it doesn't last very long, and, you know, breaks. So a lot of these computers, internet, I can't see that sustained, because it's just too energy hungry. So I can see breakdown of internet, it can be intermittent, things like that. And really, you know, it's all about community. We're social animals. We need connection. We need, you know, all these sorts of things. And, you know, it's all about turning virtual communities. So the internet's great because you can meet people and talk to people and what have you. But really, it's coming to places like this that matter the most. Because, you know, for the obvious reasons, I don't think I need to expand on that too much. A community approach is stronger than anything an individual can do. I think everybody knows that. Building local resilience through self-sufficiency. Again, if you can help people, show people how to do things, and also in turn they show you things. I can see a re-emergence of a gift economy. I mean, how many of you here, I suspect most of you have, unless you're psychopaths, have given something to somebody without expecting anything in return, and they truly, genuinely appreciate it? How does that make you feel? Is that the same as when you're earning £7.50 working in a call centre? Is that the same feeling? You know, this is how we're hardwired to do. And it's really about bringing that back. Unfortunately, a lot of us in the industrialised nations live very atomised lives. And it's very easy just to live in a flat, in a box, go to work, come back, go to work, come back, not really see anybody. You know, it's very easy for people to, you know, end up in this kind of existence and just be, you know, distracted by mindless entertainment and what have you. Skills can be bartered. You know, I take an interest in functional medicine, things like that. You know, maybe if you're ill, you can come see me, you sort out my roof. You know, that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Also, when it comes to education, a lot of the qualifications that are out there, there are not going to be any jobs for them. I think people who've got degrees now, who've just come out of university, can see this. You know, is it really worth going into debt in order to, you know, get the faint possibility of slightly higher earnings? You know, you have to look at these things. And also there's the law of diminishing returns. I mean, do you want to study medicine to the nth degree, or do you want to, like, study medicine up to a point or maybe just do massage therapy, because there'll be a lot of people breaking their backs working in fields and things like that. They're just going to need somebody to really rub their backs or anything like that. And the funny thing as well, it's business ideas as well. I can see a new age of sale re-emerging. If just-in-time inventories collapse, here's a business idea, people. If you do it, give me a cut. And this is what I'm looking at basically. Is if food inventory systems collapse, I'm looking to invest in sailing boats, powered by the air. Just strike up deals with local farmers growing organic food. It will all be organic because there won't be any oil-based fertilizer left, and basically just taking that to towns. If we buy the boats and selling it at farmers markets, things like that. There are opportunities there, and in fact that's quite empowering. And it's those communities and things that do this sort of stuff are going to basically be better off. And local currencies, I think, people talk about these things. At first I was quite sceptical about local currencies, but as a means of coping, I think they're excellent. And when things get really tough, go for them. But just be aware that they're only short to medium term, because once they get really successful, the control group of society is no longer getting a cut. So they'll basically just stop it and crush it. That happened in Austria, I think, in the 20s. So as I hinted at earlier on, to bear in mind that risk will be everywhere. So you can't live a risk-free life. Every time you cross a road, you're taking a risk. Insurance is not going to be available, and in fact, most insurance is a joke. If you've got paying for deposit insurance or any of these things, that's just a psychological con just to make you think that your money is safe. It's not. So don't bother paying out for that sort of stuff. Or payment protection insurance. I think there's lots of claims against that fairly recently. Insurance will not, sorry, I said that one. Dependency is a vulnerability. So if you're dependent on key services all the time, say you're in poor health and you require a lot of medication and things like that, obviously you're vulnerable. If you're in, for various reasons, if you're got a very large debt and you're dependent on your job, you're a vulnerable individual. You've got to start thinking seriously about reducing your vulnerabilities, and everybody's vulnerabilities are different. Face uncertainty with flexibility. Like I said, the world is an uncertain place. We've been very lucky as human beings to be living in this time, but this time can no longer last. We've, this gift the planet has given us, we've exploited it, we've used it, we've cherry-picked all the cheaper oil, so all the rest of the oil is harder to get. This is a naturally human thing to do. Unfortunately, if you're not flexible, be able to change your plans, give yourself, here's an example. If you own a house, you live in an area where suddenly it becomes a ghost town practically, like Detroit. You are stuck in that area. You can't sell your house because no one's buying. You're stuck. What do? These are the kinds of things that are coming down the line. It's not going to be one big explosion and the end of the world or anything like that. It's just going to be, life's going to be tough. And you're going to all have to get into your heads that you all have to live with a lot less money, because that's what's coming. And as I said, the dash collective and individual expectations are very, very dangerous. My real fear in this country is, what they're doing to Muslim people in this country, I'm not Muslim by the way, but I can see it, is basically the same as what they did to the Jews. It's just, I'm dreading the Olympics, frankly. There's 1,500 US agents coming over, and, Christ knows what they're going to do for the Olympics. Obama's facing re-election, there's all this sort of stuff. They're really ramping up this Iran-Syria thing. They need another justification. Also, you hear a lot of people, in my workplace, you get people saying there's immigrants stealing jobs and what have you. They don't understand why. So they're easily prone to demagogy of the worst kind. And, that's one real important thing. And also, just back to expectations, if you're expecting a future of flying cars in the 21st century and all this nonsense, it's not coming. You've got a long way to come down psychologically. And also, people talk about the super rich, they're just grabbing all the resources and all this. Yes, they are. But guess what? Most of the super rich, most of their assets are in digital and paper money. So when deflation comes, most of them will be wiped out. And psychologically speaking, that's for them a 100-foot story drop. If you're already pretty poor, all you're dropping is one story. You can just brush yourself off and just go, oh, all right, then I'll carry on as normal. This is not going to be the case for a lot of these people. And you know, I remember some years ago, some guy in Telford or something like that, in Shropshire, you know, well, successful millionaire, did well. And basically his business went under, so he killed his wife and family and his horses. And, you know, so you get these events going on in people's heads because people start blaming themselves. And it's important not to blame yourself. You are not responsible for what is about to happen. The oil thing, frankly, no one is responsible. This is just a fact of life. This is a part of this. No, we are geologically constrained, if you will. Be worth more to your employer than he's paying you. Yeah, I know that sucks sometimes, depending on what job you're doing. But yes, if you want to keep your job, you want to keep having, you know, some money in the future, you're really going to have to make yourself priceless. And like I said, their connections with other people matter more. So it really does matter, you know, how you conduct yourself, how much social capital you put into people, and people generally will reciprocate. You know, of course you can get your leeches and what have you, but everybody's situation is different. And it's, you know, if you're gonna, there's a lot of people out there who aren't going to get it. A lot of these people, it's going to come to them as a complete surprise, and they're going to behave in all kinds of weird and wonderful ways, mainly negative. Don't allow yourself to fall into the same trap. So just, you know, to conclude this rather cheery chat, a very, very serious deflation crisis is approaching. A lot of people think it's inflation, hyperinflation. You know, if we're going to look at a sine curve, we are kind of like down here somewhere and it's coming down. It'll come back up and that'll be inflationary, deflation, hyperinflation. So, you know, we are like, and I think what's going to be different this time compared to other deflationary depressions is the oil thing. At least, for example, America was in a deflationary depression prior to Second World War. At least they got out of it by turning all those factories they were using for tanks into you know, various other forms. And also, it takes time for productive capacity to increase. We're not going to have the productive capacity because the energy is not going to be there to do the work. Things like computers, for example, they require absolutely spotless fabrication plants. One bit of dust in the plant, you have to knock the plant down. If you have a power cut and the filters and all that aren't working, what happens to the supply? You know? So there's so many knock-on consequences in the supply chain, the production of our technology. I'm afraid we're going to be losing a lot of our toys, so you probably want to start thinking about skills that are practical and give you, you know, so you look at your own lives, look at, you know, if I lost my job tomorrow, if I lost this, that and the other, how would I get on? You know, these are the things you've got to start considering. By the way, I hope I'm wrong on everything I'm saying here. I really do. So yeah, we'll experience a second Great Depression. It's going to be worse than the first one because basically the bubble is so much bigger. We've had all this excess energy feeding this bubble of human growth, of fake wealth. 30 years ago, there was no derivatives market. Now there's a 1.5 quadrillion derivatives bubble. Where did that wealth come from? Nowhere. The risk of international conflict, obviously I don't need to go into this, it's going to be resource wars, you know, fought over just basically space, time and everything. So energy poor for future. With less energy we'll not be able to have the same kind of economy or society. And however, you know, I want to end this kind of slightly on a joyful note, and it's basically, you know, despite all of this, there's still scope for joy and connection with others. Human beings have lived over 90% of their time without money. I suspect if we go on for another, you know, 50,000 years or so, I think will be the case again. We're heading for a resource-based economy, whether you like it or not. It just depends if there'll be 4 people in a post-apocalyptic nuclear sort of thing, or you know, whether we do it all together. You know, or something in between. And that's it. Thank you. And if you've got any questions, I'll answer them. Yeah. Well, at the moment, I'm thinking about moving to Switzerland because I think this government's going to try some tricks. Yeah. The thing is, I can't eat gold. It's only it's only a store of wealth. You know, I worked really hard for 6 years abroad. I did quite well. I don't see why I should get shafted. So that's what I'm trying to do. It's just a mitigation. They could change the laws. They could make ownership of gold illegal. I could lose everything. You know, but at least I tried. That's one of the things.
Does your approach on this alter your opinion of? Let me rephrase that. Does this make you want to tell people who've got this focus on a resource-based economy to do anything different with their approach or thinking on it?
Yeah. Like, I'm all for the Zeitgeist movement and various other, movements out there who are trying to make a better world. There's 1,000,001 good ideas out there. But what are the ideas that are going to save the most lives? If you've got a polar bear chasing you, are you going to worry about the fact that you might let the gas on in the house? Do you know what I mean? So, and unfortunately, it's much harder to talk to people about resource-based economies when they've basically got nothing in their stomachs. Yeah. So there are these challenges coming. People are saying maybe when things collapse, people start looking for something new. They could equally just be looking for a demagogue who's willing to just basically feed them a load of lies and basically get them sticking you in prison.
What's the most positive way you can frame it?
I don't think there is, particularly the oil energy thing. I mean, we can argue about finance all day, but the energy thing is just, it is the main driver of everything we do, so that energy can't do work. So remove the energy out of the system or reduce it dramatically, the entire civilization breaks down into a new form. When I talk about socio-economic complexity of societies and civilizations, I recommend the work of Dr. Joseph Tinter, who's an archaeologist, done really good work on this. But basically, collapses can take quite a long time. It's not a singular event. The Roman Empire took the best part of 700 years to diminish to non-existent. This one's going to be a lot quicker though, I think, because of the technology, access to information, weaponry, things like that. So.
Is this thing